think there is a very big difference between being a tourist and actually, try to work in certain cultures. So I would say for people who are trying to or interested in building up international careers, get small immersion experience, small, internships, or in our field, that would be visiting professorship. So try that.
Welcome to International Business Today, where we discuss the most critical issues in international business with the top academic experts and thought leaders. I'm Paula Kellejoria, professor in the International Business and Strategy Group at Northeastern University's DeMoore McKim School of Business, the sponsor of this podcast. Today, I am so happy to be joined by Dana Minbaeva. Dana is a professor of human resource management at King's College London and has a part-time faculty appointment at Copenhagen Business School in Denmark. Dana is a leading expert in strategic and international human resource management. Dana, welcome to International Business Today.
Thank you very much.
It is so great to have you here. I'm so interested in your research in the area of knowledge sharing in multinational companies. What are you working on? What are you doing in this area?
Well, we've been studying knowledge sharing process in multinational corporations for many years. I guess what we are learning from all that research is that we can create structures, we can design very sophisticated knowledge management systems, but ultimately it's all about individuals and their knowledge sharing behaviors. So I guess where we are with all that research on knowledge sharing in multinational corporations is that it's all about individual abilities. It's about their willingness to share knowledge, and it's also very much about them grabbing the opportunities to engage into the knowledge sharing activity. So I would say that at the beginning of the whole research journey, we really focused on processes, structures, HRM practices, knowledge management systems, ultimately arriving to the conclusion that you can have it all, but and invest enormously in your knowledge management architecture. But if individuals are not able or not willing or do not see any opportunities to engage into knowledge sharing, all this investment will lead to nothing.
So that's really interesting. So what are companies doing to help find people who are able and willing to knowledge share? Are they trying to select people in or train them to do it or promote those who are better knowledge sharers?
Well, I guess it's a part of the whole kind of portfolio of practices. But I would say for managers, I would say just to ask yourself a question: do we have policies and practices in place that equip our key knowledge holders with knowledge and skills and perhaps competences needed to articulate what they know and share it with other people in their subsidiary or maybe even across the whole multinational? Do we have we created a learning environment in which those knowledge holders are intrinsically motivated and willing to give away their knowledge instead of hoarding and creating kind of knowledge hostility? But most importantly, are we offering opportunities enough for people to engage in this sharing behavior, right? Because in a sense, I do believe that knowledge sharing is natural. However, it's something that organizational policies and practices could support and, to support, increase and facilitate. And there are some learning environments in which individuals are much more willing to engage in the knowledge sharing and knowledge exchanges compared to others.
Is there a cultural difference there, though? Is there some cultures that are more forthcoming, just naturally better knowledge sharing, or are those that are less willing?
There have been lots of research looking at that, and naturally, as you would also imagine, that one would expect certain cultures, to be quote unquote better in knowledge sharing, but there are no consistent findings.
Oh, interesting. Really
and
interesting.
I think that's good, because if we talk about culture and knowledge sharing, it's organizational culture. It's organizational learning environment that is much more conducive to such behavior. And culture sometimes or often is just treated as an excuse for organizational inability to create such environment.
That's so important, because I think is we talk about culture. Culture is not just about what happens within the boundaries of a country. Culture is also organizational culture, generational culture, lots of different cultural layers, right? So org culture is really important for creating knowledge sharing. How is this changing, though, in virtual teams and global teams? Is there something different that you've learned when studying teams?
Yes, I think, in fact, the whole introduction of technology that we've been witnessing for the last, I would say, 3, 5, 7 years, perhaps, it's making us to go back and revisit some of these, some of our perhaps conclusions or even findings, perhaps some assumptions that we did, 10, 20 years ago. Because at that time, when we talked about knowledge sharing, we thought, okay, well, here's a knowledge center, and we have to kind of work, quote unquote, on his or her disseminative capacity, right, to kind of give away knowledge. Well, there is some kind of a message, and there is a knowledge receiver, and we would like to, you could say, support his or her absorptive capacity, to, in other words, ability to recognize the value of knowledge, to utilize it, to apply it to commercial end. And then there is the organizational environment. What happened with the introduction of technology, and it's something that I'm just thinking of, so we don't have a paper on it,
right,
or,
it's new.
but it's something
sure.
that I'm playing with this idea that model, which kind of, we could say, dictated our research for 10, 15 years, probably need to be revised, because there is a new player in all those relationships between sender and receiver. Before it was just message, verbal, very often message. Now there is a technology.
Yeah, nice.
Technology with its memory, storage, ability to learn, right? Ability to develop. So I think knowledge sharing on the whole knowledge management literature is going to get back big time. So I guess knowledge management 2.0 will be something that we will be seeing more and more research on with a new player.
That's really
technology.
Interesting. What do you think is going to happen? Like, what do you think will change? I'm always so worried about, trust within global teams. And if we rely too much on technology and forget that people are part of that equation, as you said, that sometimes we could erode trust. Is there something we can do to enhance, using technology, that we can enhance our global team's ability to share knowledge and communicate effectively?
So there are two things I would like to talk about. The first one is, first of all, we as researchers working on, for example, managing people or human resource management or anything to do with human capital, I think we need to stop focusing exclusively on individuals and start focusing on interfaces between human and technology, because that's where management and organization will be happening. So that actually is relevant for lots of fields, like say management in general, organizational behavior, human resource management, or org studies. So all those fields that basically focused on behavior of individuals, so individual behavior, perhaps in the context of teams or organizations. But now there is no such thing. There is not just individual behavior alone, because there is always a technology. So that shift, I think, it's something that we will have to perhaps be more attentive, we as researchers, but also companies, of course, in the nearest future. The second point that I wanted to make with regards to the global virtual teams is kind of interesting, because COVID taught us that we could work in virtual teams and we can work in global virtual teams. So we quickly adjusted to the new ways of working, teams, virtual coffee breaks, virtual wine tasting, virtual Christmas song singing. I think we tried it all, right? So I
hope not the last one.
No, last one is really, really bad. Bad idea. So nevertheless, could say we kind of intuitively thought, oh my God, we got to do something to keep that trust, to keep that, human factor, that interactions, etc. And we started copying whatever we do in our face-to-face, human-to-human interactions and just kind of try to reapply it to the virtual settings. Well, it's okay and it's good enough and perhaps helpful, but it's not sustainable in terms of it's not going to live long. First, second of all, it's a little bit short-sighted. What we could continue doing that, but what we also need to find, we need to find something that exists only in virtual world, but enables same underlying mechanisms that come in place when, for example, we bump into each other at the coffee machine, or we, I don't know, walk together.
Reality?
Right. Well, I don't know, but that's why we are studying, and this is one of my ongoing projects right now, where now with the second multinational, we're trying to understand what are those mechanisms, because whatever works in a human-to-human interaction will always be better than whatever we copy from here to the virtual world. Mm-hmm. So we need to find something that enacts similar, you could say, mechanisms. For example, building trust, getting to know each other, I don't know, familiarity, reciprocity, you name it, right? But they only should exist in the virtual world.
Interesting.
Because that will be not a substitution, but synergy, complementarities.
Right. Are any companies doing this really well? You don't have to name them, but are you seeing some examples out there of companies that are doing it well? What are they doing?
Well, we studied a Danish multinational and followed a team that works exclusively in that virtual setting. We followed them over a period of 6 to 8 months and also tried to experiment and understand what works and what doesn't. So what we are finding, there are, of course, lots of best practices, such as, for example, when you start your weekly meeting with the team, spend 15, 30 minutes on small talk. Keep that human factor going and flowing. For instance, the other thing is that, leave some space in the agenda for ideas or off-the-shelf kind of solutions, out-of-box thinking. What we're also finding that virtual work or working in virtual teams push people towards exploitation. We become very efficient. We become very effective. We create this tunnel vision. So we're getting a lot of work done and we are very efficient. However, so those virtual teams that we worked, all of them said, there are no space for new ideas. We don't discuss different ways. We are so...
It's more task-focused.
We're very good in execution. So virtual teams are fantastic in execution and exploitation. But over time, they realize that, well, actually, we are losing that creativity and new ideas. And it's understandable, Paula, because what we know in the knowledge-sharing innovation literature is that serendipity.
Right.
That creates a sparks and recombination of different ideas. It doesn't exist in Microsoft Teams, because even if I want to bump into you and exchange some ideas, I gotta schedule that meeting on Microsoft Teams. Right. So the big question right now: how do we organize for serendipity in the global virtual teams. And that creates tension, paradoxes, dilemmas. So that's why I think, this particular aspect is something that both researchers, academics, as well as practitioners will be struggling, or at least will be working with in the nearest couple of years.
Really great work you're doing, Dana. We need to get you back on this show to when you
happy.
find out all your
We'll
results from this study. Really interesting. So you've worked in many cultures. You've been studying knowledge sharing. Do you have a piece of advice you would give those of us who are trying to build our international careers and listeners of International Business Today who want maybe a global career? What advice would you give them?
Well, I think, to be absolutely honest, I kind of never, growing up in a very different environment. I was born in the Soviet Union. So my first degree was mining engineering. So I was not supposed to be in international business research.
So from mining engineering to international HR?
Right,
How did you go there?
Oh, that's another story. But nevertheless, I never had this idea I want to have an international career. But I wanted to travel the world, and I wanted to live and work in different cultures. So I guess that's what I enjoy most. And I think there is a very big difference between being a tourist and actually, try to work in certain cultures. So I would say for people who are trying to or interested in building up international careers, get small immersion experience, small, internships, or in our field, that would be visiting professorship. So try that, because I personally, several times in my life, I packed whole my life in the 2 suitcases and moved to the new place where you don't have family, you don't have friends, you don't even know the language. So all you have is your work, and it's difficult. So I would say kind of try it, push yourself out of your comfort zone, but be gentle with yourself because it's tough. Right. But as for my personal journey from the mining engineering to the international
That's out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, that was nothing that I did intentionally. It's just when I finished my 6 years of engineering studies, Soviet Union collapsed, and there was just no jobs, and there was no money, and none of my family members had anything. So I guess for me, that transition happened, at the beginning of 90s, and it was simply because you just, sometimes now people, when I tell the story, they say, well, you've been very entrepreneurial. I said, no, I was just surviving. So I washed the floor, I cleaned the public bathrooms, I went to accounting courses. That was equally painful as washing the floor. So I did many things, right? But in 94, I decided that I want to do something qualitatively different with my life, and I decided to learn English and get myself in a North American style of MBA. And then at the end of my second year of study, which I took a finance major because that's how you become rich naturally, right? Second year of study, I found one book in our library, was Principles of Management. And there was this little chapter about personnel. It's not even HR. Wow. And I read it, and that's it. Since June 1996, I became an international HR.
Oh, that's a beautiful story. But it is finding your passions and following them, and willing to go outside of your comfort zone and not settle, and self-direct your career, which is really exciting. Dana, thank you so much. This was great. And thanks for being here.
Thank you.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us for today's episode of International Business Today. If you enjoyed it, please share it with your network. As always, we'd love to hear from you.